Ladies and gentlemen, welcome again to my channel. Today we look at the sad state of Paris, a city once called the center of Europe, but now burning with the anger of its own people. Thousands of citizens are on the streets every day, blocking roads, setting institutions on fire, and clashing with the police. The chants are loud, the smoke is rising, and their message is clear. Macron must go. For decades, France survived by eating the food of Africa, using the wealth of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso to fuel its economy. Uranium from Niger kept its nuclear plants alive. Gold and cotton from Mali fed its industries. Resources from Burkina Faso kept its banks strong. France labeled this progress as civilization. However, the reality was that France's survival came at a great cost to Africa. Yet the situation has dramatically shifted since 2022. France was expelled from the Sahel. One by one, Mali said no. Niger said no. Burkina Faso said no. They closed the doors, cut the chains, and told Paris that Africa would no longer serve as its life support. France believed it could return within a few months, that new agreements would be made, but 2 years have passed and the door is still closed. Today, the French economy is gasping for air, and the empire is choking on its own weakness. France's leaders know the truth, but will not say it openly. The nation is drowning in debt over $3.3 trillion that grows by thousands every second. Unemployment is climbing. Operations have ceased for 57 companies. A pair of nuclear facilities are inactive due to the disruption in the supply of affordable uranium from Niger. The government has declared spending reductions because of an overwhelming budget deficit, cuts that include freezing pensions, slashing services, and reducing support to citizens. This is where the anger grows deepest. Retirees who worked all their lives now see their pensions frozen. Families who depend on public services see them shrinking. Workers face inflation, higher bills, and low wages. Poverty is rising. Inequality is sharp. And yet the government continues to protect the elites while the ordinary people carry the burden. And at the center of the storm stands President Emmanuel Macron. To the French people, he has become the symbol of arrogance, the face of betrayal. They perceive him as an individual disconnected from the everyday lives of citizens. He seems more preoccupied with international conflicts and speeches on the world stage than the hardship of his own people. The frequent turnover of prime ministers, unfulfilled pledges, and speeches that fail to provide tangible relief have all contributed to this sentiment. All of this has made the people lose faith in him. Now the protests no longer shout for reforms. They no longer shout for higher wages only. They shout for his resignation. The banners carried on the streets say it clearly. Macron, step down. Brothers and sisters, the empire that once stood tall is now trembling. France thought it could survive without Africa, but the truth is written in the smoke of its streets. Africa has cut the lifeline, and the French citizens are now paying the price. They cannot eat promises. They are unable to pay their bills with rhetoric. They find it impossible to illuminate their homes without a source of uranium. The public's anger is no longer restrained. It is no longer polite. It is raw, it is fierce, it is fire. And when citizens rise in such numbers, governments shake. Brothers and sisters, if you walk through the streets of France today, you will not hear the sound of laughter or music. You will hear the heavy sound of marching feet, of drums beaten in anger, of voices raised against a system that no longer serves the people. Paris, Lyon, Marseille, Bordeaux. Every city is now filled with protests. They block highways. They ignite fires in public structures. Their demonstrations continue day and night as they refuse to be silenced. Law enforcement is present everywhere, clad in armor, holding shields, and prepared with tear gas. But even with all their power, they cannot silence the crowds. For every protester pushed back, 10 more rise from the corners. For every barricade broken, another one is built. The air smells of smoke. The ground is stained with fire. And the people are shouting one name louder than all others. Macron. The workers shout for better wages. They say they cannot live on crumbs while prices rise every month. Inflation has eaten their salaries. What once bought food for a week now barely buys food for 3 days. The price of gas, electricity, and bread continues to increase, while their income stays the same. Retirees are protesting against the freeze on their pensions. They dedicated their entire lives to working and fulfilling their obligations. And now, in their old age, the government tells them their money will be locked. They march with sticks in their hands and fire in their hearts, saying, "We will not suffer silently." The youth, jobless and restless, shout against unemployment. Factories are closing, companies are leaving, and the future looks dark. They say, "How can we build a life if the state gives us no chance to work?" Their anger burns the hottest, for they see a future stolen before it even begins. And the government, instead of listening, continues with arrogance. Ministers argue, prime ministers are changed again and again, but nothing changes in the lives of ordinary citizens. The legislature discusses budgets, deficits, and reforms. In the streets, however, people are concerned with hunger, rent, bills, and survival. The divide between the rulers and the ruled has become so vast that it seems like two separate nations. One in the palaces of Paris, the other in the broken streets. This is why the people no longer believe in reforms. They do not want promises anymore. They want Macron gone. They want the whole system to be broken and rebuilt. Every day the protests grow louder, and every day the police respond with more force. Tear gas clouds the air. Water cannons spray. Rubber bullets fly. But instead of scaring the people, these actions fuel the fire. Mothers march with their children. Workers link arms in solidarity. Students refuse to leave. When the police brandish their batons, the chanting only intensifies. Macron resign. The state is fighting its own people. And in that fight, it is losing legitimacy. Because when a government fears its people, that government is already broken. Let us not forget the root of this fire. France is not burning only because of pensions or wages. France is burning because the empire has lost its lifeline. For decades, it survived on Africa's resources. But now Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso have shut the door. Uranium is gone. Gold is gone. Cotton is gone. Inexpensive resources are no longer available. Without Africa, France's vulnerability is clear. The populace may not voice it directly, but this is the underlying reason their lives are deteriorating. Their anger is not only against Macron, but against the fall of the empire that once fed them. Brothers and sisters, no nation falls in silence. When an empire begins to collapse, the signs are written everywhere. In its banks, in its factories, in its streets, and in the eyes of its hungry citizens. France today is that empire in collapse. Its economy, once praised as the engine of Europe, is now choking under the weight of its own weakness. The first and loudest sign is the debt. France is drowning in a 3.3 trillion euro deficit. This mountain of debt increases by nearly $5,000 every second. Consider that for a moment. By the time a man is done eating his bread, the national debt has already increased. Before a woman boils her pot of rice, the deficit has climbed higher. This is not just a number written in government papers. This is a burden that presses on every citizen's shoulder. It means higher taxes, smaller pensions, and fewer public services. Then comes the wound of unemployment. 57 major companies have already collapsed, shutting down factories and offices, throwing workers into the streets. Families who once lived with dignity now line up at food banks. Young people with degrees cannot find jobs. Skilled workers who built cars, machines, and industries now sit idle, their hands heavy with frustration. Every person without a job becomes another demonstrator in the streets. Hunger will not be ignored. It finds its voice in fire and chants. France's political system is breaking under this pressure. In just 14 months, the government has collapsed 4 times. Prime ministers come and go, replaced like broken tiles on a leaking roof. But the water keeps pouring in. Parliament is filled with arguments, promises, and empty debates. But the reality outside is harsher than any speech. The people see no difference between left or right, conservative or liberal. All they see is failure. And so they turn their anger toward the president himself. Macron, as the face of the government, has become the symbol of its failure. And regarding electricity, even the famous lights of Paris are no longer guaranteed. For decades, France's nuclear plants were powered by uranium obtained cheaply from Niger. But when Niger cut that supply, the plants faltered. 2 major reactors have already shut down, and the cost of energy has tripled. Families cannot pay their bills. Industries cannot keep up with expenses. And the winter grows colder each year. Imagine Paris, once called the City of Light, now struggling to keep its lights on. This is not just symbolic. It is the truth of a falling empire. All these issues, the debt, unemployment, failing companies, unstable governments, and the electricity crisis, erupt onto the streets as fire. These problems fuel the demonstrations. Every banner raised against Macron is a symbol of hunger. Every tire burned is lit with debt. Every chant is a cry against poverty. This is why the protests do not die. Because the crisis is not only political, it is economic. And no speech can stop an empty stomach from roaring. The French leaders are desperate. But their desperation only adds more fuel. Freezing pensions, cutting budgets, reducing services. These only deepen the anger. Instead of mending the injuries, they are adding insult to them. Consequently, the fire intensifies, the protests expand, and the calls against Macron become more vociferous. France is facing not only a political crisis, but an economic collapse that touches every home, every family, every worker. In Paris, the cry echoes across the boulevards, Macron demon. In Lyon, the banners are painted with the same words. In Marseille, the chants shake the old streets. Macron, step down. It is no longer about pensions alone, no longer about wages alone. It is personal. The people see Macron as the one who has failed them, the one who has ignored their pain, the one who spends his energy on foreign speech while his own people starve. The chants are loud, the fires are bright, and the anger is raw. It is not only Macron. The entire political elite is under attack. The public asserts that the ruling class has let them down. They argue that ministers and officials enjoy comfortable lifestyles, while regular citizens bear the weight of debt and inflation. They point to repeated changes in prime ministers, to endless debates in parliament, and they see nothing but failure. The people no longer believe in the system, they no longer believe in the elites, and so they aim their anger at the head of the system, Macron himself. The protests are no longer peaceful marches, they are uprisings, roads are blocked, train stations are shut, schools are closed, public buildings are burned, banks are attacked. Every week, confrontations with the police become increasingly violent. The air is filled with tear gas. Water cannons soak the demonstrators. Rubber bullets are discharged. But the protesters do not retreat. They come back stronger, louder, angrier. Every clash adds to the hatred of Macron. Every baton swing strengthens the cry for his resignation. For the French people, Macron has become the symbol of their suffering. He is blamed for the debt, for the unemployment, for the frozen pensions, for the failing services. He is blamed for focusing on Ukraine and Africa while ignoring France itself. He is blamed for arrogance, for pride, for refusing to listen. And so the outcry has a single focus. Macron's departure is demanded. The issue is no longer about whether the protests will cease. The question is whether Macron can survive them. For when a people rise with one voice, history shows that resignation is the only escape. The chants are growing louder every day and the president's seat grows weaker with every sunrise. France is not only facing debt, poverty, and hunger. France is facing the fury of its own people, demanding the head of the man they believe betrayed them. But this is not only France's problem, it is Europe's nightmare. Because France is not just any nation, it is one of the pillars of Europe. If France collapses, the repercussions will extend to Brussels, Berlin, and London. The signs of instability are already apparent. Fear is already taking hold. Europe is already aware of the reality. The old order built on Africa's wealth is collapsing. If Paris cannot survive without Africa, Can London survive without Nigeria? Can Berlin survive without Congo? Can Brussels survive without Africa's minerals? The question is shaking every capital tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, this is History and Legacy Africa. We have seen the protests. We have watched France drowning in debt, in hunger, in anger. And we have understood the deeper truth that the fall of France is the rise of Africa. This is the age of Africa. History had taught Africans to expect betrayal from within as much as from without. Still, for the moment, Africa had spoken with a single voice, and Netanyahu's government was left stunned. As one Israeli analyst admitted on live television, "We underestimated them. We never thought Africa would matter this much." Why did Ibrahim Traore respond with such force when Qatar came under fire? The answer lies not only in diplomacy, but in memory, in loyalty, and in a principle that is older than modern borders. Sovereignty for Africans. Sovereignty is not an abstract word written into charters. It is a scar. It is the memory of Leumba's body hidden in acid, of Sankra's blood staining the streets of Ouagadougou, of Gaddafi dragged through the dirt. It serves as a constant reminder that when foreign powers control your destiny, your own people bear the consequences in blood. To Traore, Qatar was more than just another Gulf nation. Qatar was a partner that had invested in Burkina Faso when others had not. Its sovereign wealth funds financed hospitals in the Sahel. Its companies built roads that connected forgotten villages. Qatari scholarships opened doors for young Africans to study abroad. And while Western aid often came with conditions, lectures, and surveillance, Qatar's approach had been different, respectful, pragmatic, rooted in the idea of mutual benefit. When a friend like that comes under attack, silence is betrayal. That is why Traore told his cabinet at Forest, "Mim, prepare our strongest condemnation. Africa speaks today." His words revealed a truth too many global leaders ignored, that Africa's quietness was never a sign of agreement, but rather of tolerance. That tolerance had finally reached its limit. The political and moral framing became clear. Where Washington expressed concern, Traore expressed condemnation. Where Europe called for restraint, Burkina Faso called for consequences. The difference was not in vocabulary, it was in courage. Africa, often dismissed as a follower in global affairs, was now taking the lead. Critics argued that Burkina Faso's action was reckless. How could a small, landlocked state afford to challenge Israel, a nuclear power backed by Washington? But here lies the revelation. Power in the 21st century is not only about bombs and missiles. It is about legitimacy, about votes at the United Nations, about markets and minerals, about the moral authority to say no when the strong trample the weak. Israel had made a mistake by thinking Africa was still a continent of passive observers. Traore's condemnation demonstrated the opposite. The response spread rapidly. Within 48 hours, 15 African leaders issued similar statements. Within 72 hours, African ambassadors were recalled from Tel Aviv. South Africa suspended relations. Algeria closed its airspace. Morocco canceled agricultural deals. Nigeria terminated defense contracts. This was not coordinated by Washington or Paris. It was coordinated by anger, by principle, by the shared conviction that sovereignty mattered more than alliances built on fear. And for ordinary Africans, the symbolism was electric. In Ouagadougou, students gathered outside the university gates holding handwritten signs. Qatar today, Africa tomorrow. In Lagos, taxi drivers listened to call-in shows, urging their leaders to emulate Traore. In Nairobi, women's groups marched with banners that read, "Sovereignty is sacred." For the first time in years, Africa was united not by tragedy, but by defiance. The deeper question lingered. Was this only about Israel and Qatar, or was it about something larger? The answer revealed in every African response was clear. It was about establishing a new rule in global politics. Sovereignty is non-negotiable. If Russia could not rewrite Ukraine's borders without consequences,